Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
So, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the group chat brought to you by OVERMUGGED. I'm your host, Darrell, and with me today is Dixon. And today's topic that we're going to be discussing is managing intense school schedule. So I think many of you have started school, it's already February, March, and you're just rolling along. Competition season's upcoming, SYF is upcoming, your endless amount of remedials and post-school lessons and extra lessons, everything just feels like a big mess and you feel like you can't handle it anymore. This podcast episode is for you, right? So Dixon's with me today, and I think something that we have in common is that we're both student athletes. So maybe to start off today's podcast episode, I'll let Dixon start first. How was your school life like as a student athlete? Maybe share with us a little bit more about what sport you do and how was your schedule like?
Okay, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Dixon. So as a student athlete, I represented my school in Taekwondo. I have been representing them in in secondary school as well as in JC as well as in university. So I joined the national team in like 2009. So as part of my commitment, we train about 6 days a week. And because of that, I think that takes up a lot of time, a lot of free time, and a lot of time that I should have spent studying right away from like doing sports lah. So that was quite a struggle, especially sometimes if school were to end at 4 or 5 p.m., right? And training starts at 7:30, then I gotta like rush home, put my things down, change, have dinner, and then rush back out for training. Then I never really get to do any homework. Yeah, so like as a student, I think that was very crazy, especially during JC, where your lessons end very late, your CCA end very late, and then after CCA, you still have to go for training. So yeah, it was very hectic. How about you, Darrell?
So for me, I'm a floorball player. So same thing, played in secondary, JC, went on to play in university as well. And for me, my national team stint was a very short one, but was during university. But I was in the youth team when I was at secondary and JC. And same thing, training schedule-wise was pretty tough. I think for school training, maybe 3 times a week and maybe 1 to 2 PT sessions. And then probably 2 trainings a week for the youth team. And if competition season's upcoming, maybe up to 3 trainings externally for the youth team itself. So the most I trained was like 8 times a week. That number doesn't make up, right? But that's because I train in the morning, then in the evening there's another training, something like that. Or maybe a friendly, which I count as a training as well. So that was the max. But I think on average, I would say 4 to 5 times a week is at minimum, if I combine both my school and youth team commitment and sometime as well as club trainings as well, which I think many athletes out here, you also probably play in an external club somewhere, right? So I think those are all very real situations that happen. Really wasn't easy. I think something else that I really struggled with was not just time, but fatigue in general. Like I get really tired after training. Then even if I have the time, say a 1 hour, like maybe from 11 p.m. to 12 midnight, I also struggle to stay awake because my body needed that rest. And then when I wake up the next morning, I'm also so lethargic. I ended up falling asleep in classes and stuff. Beyond what I would want to do, that's just like my body telling me that I need the rest kind of thing. So it really wasn't easy in terms of schedule-wise, because as you guys probably know, for those even in performing arts as well, the practice hours could get quite insane closer to competition period. So I think with what I have been through, what Dixon has been through, what we hope to share today is more on like, if you are in a similar situation as we were, how can you better manage your time, right? Instead of how better you can manage your time, it's also how better you can learn to strike a balance as well between the two. So hopefully making your life a tad bit better. I think that's really important. So I think 3 key things, right, is study, rest, and training, right? Your academics, taking care of your body, making sure you get enough rest, and training time itself. Dixon, for you, what was like your order of priority, or how do you like play around with this 3? How do you strike a balance in a way?
Honestly, it wasn't really a balance. It was more of like integration for me, because especially, okay, not so much in O levels, yeah, because I had DSA, but then like after that, like A levels, you could not really like DSA to a university, so your rank point was like like the be all and end all to me. At 18 years old, it felt like A level was like this mountain that you had to overcome, and it just seems like such a towering mountain. So it was very difficult lah back then. How do I strike a balance is that I came up with a timetable, a little bit OCD-ish, but I need to be very organized. And even like today, I still have like a calendar like of all my events and plans because it's honestly very hard to keep track, you know. And I think striking a balance is good, but it may also be a little bit idealistic. So for me, it's about integrating like just every free pocket of time that you have, right? You need to utilize it very efficiently and effectively. So if you're like on the bus traveling, maybe like if you need a social life, okay, you can scroll through your Instagram. But otherwise, I think it's a very good time for you to like just close your eyes and sleep. Just like catch that 10-minute power nap, whatever, for you to like go on to your next activity. So I think that was basically what I did. So I like what did I do? Okay, so I would go to school, then I go for training, then I sleep first. And then I wake up very early in the next morning, like maybe 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. and do my stuff. I'm not sure if it works for other people, but I think it works for me because after training when you're so tired and then it's like very hard for you to like do your tutorials and to focus in school after that. So I think it'll be more effective for me to like just go and sleep first and then wake up in the morning when everyone is very quiet, the surroundings is very peaceful, and then my mind is like energized and rejuvenated. That's when like the information can get into my head a lot faster and can be retained there for a longer period of time. So that was how I managed it. How about you, Darrell?
For me, I would say striking a balance was also really difficult. I mean, I would like to say I was able to strike a balance. But for me, my balance was more like that. During the competition season or during the peak season, I really just invested all my time and energy into the competition itself, like the trainings and stuff. I don't want to lie to say that I managed my academics well. I probably didn't. Okay. But the point being is that I kind of set like the right time for the right things. So during competition season, yeah, I focus on doing my best. I even watch like my post-match footages to review where I did well, where I didn't. I really make sure that I was as good an athlete as possible, in the best condition as I could. But the moment my competition season is over, I don't really linger that much longer to say that, oh, I just want to like maybe still have like a couple of trainings and stuff. If I say it's a break, and it's time to focus on my academics, I really turn my full focus onto that. So at O levels, after my B division, which ended back then for me, it ended in March, April. And I finished my club commitments in the youth team, say in June. I completely stopped everything related to floorball. And from July onwards, it was just full academics. I mean, it's a bit unhealthy in that sense, because like completely cut off. But for me, it was really important to invest myself into what I want to focus on during that duration. Even though I DS8 as well, but I also make sure I did my best for O levels, right? Then same thing for A levels, I make sure to cut everything off by June. Then from June onwards, it was all out academics for me. So for me, that was kind of like where my headspace was at. I wouldn't say that it's fully healthy because I kind of lagged behind a lot and it was really difficult to catch back up. So I had to put in like double, triple, quadruple the effort. But if I could go back to my older self and maybe give myself a bit of advice, is to just be a little bit more consistent. Maybe just listen in class, because if you're in class, you're not in training, you don't like in class, then you go and think about your competition, your match data. If you're in class, just focus on your class log, right? Learn what you need to learn, do the work that you can do. Because sometimes, y'all don't lie, right? Sometimes in class, certain class, you don't listen, right? Those class, you go and do your work or something, like, make the best of your time. But then when it comes to focus, when it's come time for training or for you to focus on your competition, do so, right? But then just make sure that if it's a time slot dedicated for study, you study. If it's a time slot for training, you go for training. I think that was what works best for me, at least to the best of my knowledge. So making sure that I focus on whatever I'm doing. I think that kind of leads us to the next point, which I think is quite interesting, which is for both me and Dixon, because we were both student athletes and even athletes still in university, right? What are some of the skills, right, or some of the mentality that you can bring over from, say, from sports to academics that you found that work well for you?
Right. I think one very pertinent one, right, would be grit. Okay, because in sports, like being a national player, we all know that there are other countries that are way stronger. Like for taekwondo, right? Singapore, we are good, but we're not the best. So every time we have to go up against countries such as maybe Korea or Chinese Taipei, or even our neighboring countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, all these countries are very, very strong. So when we go up against them, sometimes we just feel like, what's the point? We're gonna lose anyway, you know. So, but then of course we don't go in with that spirit. We go in there trying our best, even though it seems like an insurmountable challenge. And sometimes we did win those countries, as difficult as they may seem to like be to defeat. And I think that was a good experience which I brought back to like school as well as to work, in where like some challenges you face, right, seem like, oh, I totally cannot overcome it at all. Whether it's a topic that you do not understand, or whether it's an exam that you just look at the question and like, oh my God, how do I go about doing this, you know? And I think you should not go in there with like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna fail already. You should go in there with like, okay, you just do your best, and then it's okay if you never like do well, because it's an opportunity for you to learn. At least you know like where you go wrong, and then you know what you can do better the next time. It's not the final like, oh, after you screw this up, then your life is over. No, that's not how it works. It's like you may not have done well this time, but then, and it may seem very difficult, but the next time you do it, just make sure you learn from your mistake. You just do what like you should have done better earlier, and then just go there with no regrets lah. Yeah. How about you, Darrell?
I think one big one for me was about striving for excellence, in a way thinking like having the winning mentality, I would say. So I would never like pull myself down or, you know, feel down about myself. I view everything more of like a challenge. So to give a little more context about my floorball journey, I was good, but I was never really the best. Like if like there's an age group band, I'm like within the top few percent of like the best players maybe in Singapore to qualify for the national team, but I was never really like the best. So for me, it was always like a constant chase. Like it wasn't like nothing was given to me on a platter. I wasn't like physically gifted to the extent that my quick twitch muscles make me have insane bursts and stuff. No. So I think what I excelled at was just being more intelligent in the game, you know, reading the game better, learning to be a better team player and stuff. And how that in a way developed my character and how it relates to academics more was that I always aim high. You know, I never like put myself down. So every time, like even if like I come across like a scenario like selections wise, you know, like I didn't expect myself to get in, but I'll still go for it, never for fear of disappointment, but always striving to make that next leap into the next level. And I think the same thing applies when I translated that to my studies. I never like settled to say that I'm never good enough, like I can't do this, I'm just like stupid, I'm not good with this, not good with this subject. I never like put myself down in that sense. I always look at it as a challenge. So some of the most stupid things that I did was more like when I take out a math paper, I will try to make myself feel like psyched up and excited for it. Like it's like a challenge, you know, it's like, oh, I'm gonna solve this shit, you know, like wow, I'm like next level, like then I feel good about myself. So I look at everything more as like a challenge. And to me, that brings out a bit more of my competitive nature. And I think that helps well and translates well into academics. I don't mean so much as competitive with your peers. I find that to be a little bit toxic, and I don't like to engage in that at all. So it's not so much about competing with my peers, but competing with myself. For me, it's always about like, can I surmount this obstacle? Can I overcome this hurdle? You know, I think that's really important for me. Translating from student athlete to my academics. Something else that I like to bring in that I found to be really important. This one might be a bit more specific, but it's about mastering your basics. So in floorball itself, there are some very basic skill sets like receiving a pass or how to do a drag shot, for example. Those are all very important skill sets that would translate to real game situations that will help you perform, because the difference between winning and losing a ball is about how you receive and how you control the ball, for example. So a lot of these minor details that I got correct actually helped me perform very well. And this kind of basics is most apparent at the highest level. I don't know whether it's fully applicable to Taekwondo, but in floorball itself, if you don't receive the ball in a specific manner, like you don't receive on the move, you are like stationary, it's very easy for the opponent to catch up to you and tackle. Or another basic skill is like you need to move towards the ball when you receive, right? So a lot of those things are things that are very conscious in nature that you build and eventually develops into a habit. So how that translates for me into academics was about developing these right habits. For example, when doing physics, is like, oh, you need to check your units kind of thing, right? Or making sure that your formulas that you're using are all correct. Or in chemistry, is about whether I included the specific keywords for specific topics. So for me, it's a lot about getting my basics right, my foundation to be grounded, making sure I do the little things correct. So that was another area that I thought was quite interesting that I translated from my athlete life to my student academic life. Dix, any more for you to add?
Not okay, not really, I would say. I think you sum it up quite well, and everything you said is very true, especially about mastering the foundations. I think when you really compete at the highest level, right, you can you can't lie about your foundations. People can see it, whether it's in floorball, whether it's in taekwondo. I mean, I do tennis as well as, and then I mean, I don't do it competitively just for fun. But like, if your basic sucks, right, you can't really play a good game anyway. So it really shows. So, if you find yourself like struggling with doing an exam question, it's always okay to go back to the basics. There's like no shame in it. It's always better to have like a strong foundation which you can build up upon to solidify and strengthen your understanding and mastery of the particular subject. Yeah.
I mean, a very quick point to add on there is like there's really no shame in asking. So even though I was like maybe a seasoned player in my team, even if I see a certain skill that I can't do well, or like I can't do my wrist shot well, for example, I'll ask for help, right? And I don't feel any shame from asking from somebody maybe even younger than me or less experienced than me, because it's all about learning. So in academics, it could translate to you asking your peers or even your teachers for help. So there's really no shame in terms of getting help when needed. So I mean, we digress a little lah, because I was like, wow, such a difficult chance to get another athlete on the podcast. So I know we started off talking about more about like managing your time schedule and stuff, and I think we covered the aspect. But let me just end off today with a more interesting shocking statement of the day. All right, so Dixon, you can answer first, then I will answer after you. So the dilemma of the day is sports useless in Singapore. So maybe we just do sports/arts, but then for our case, let's just speak purely from the sports front. So to you as a past national athlete or current one, do you think sports is useless in Singapore?
I think that's a hard no. I mean, this can morph into like a GP question or like an English essay question, right? But speaking from the lens of an individual, which I think is most applicable to most of the listeners, right? I would tell you that sports is definitely not useless in Singapore. In fact, it's very useful. I think one of the main benefits of doing sports, whether it is at a recreation level or whether it is at a competitive level, right, is that doing it, like being like exercising on its own, right, is a good form of stress reliever. I think as a student, right, you confirm feel very stressed one. And what better way to relieve that stress, right, than doing sports? Because when you do it, your body releases some hormones such as endorphins, which makes you feel happier. And at the same time, many sports are social activities which you can do with other people. And the new people that you meet or the existing people that you play with, right, are people that will form your social support group. So in school, when you're very stressed, you can have this group of people that you can rely on to encourage you, to listen to you when you need a listening ear, and to just be there for one another. So I think in terms of like your health, your mental health, physical health, as well as social aspect, right, I think sports is definitely very useful in Singapore. And maybe another aspect is that it kind of sets you apart from other people, like maybe when you're applying for uni or when you're applying for a job as well. I think having some sports on your CV makes you a little bit more interesting as a person, might even be the thing that get your foot into the door and make the person want to call you. And then during the interview, you can share about it. And then if the interviewer and you kind of like play the same sport or maybe see eye to eye on certain things, and then you can build up a rapport from that. And then I think it will stand your interview chance like a very good state lah. So I think that's quite useful as well. And apart from that, I think sports in Singapore do have other use, such as like you can use it as a career in the future. If you consider like, oh, sports cannot make money, well, you can make money from it by being a coach, or if you compete in major games such as SEA Games, Asian Games, as well as the Olympics, you definitely can make money from it. But of course, I'm not saying that you should join sports simply because of the money, but it's not entirely useless if you were to look at it from a monetary, financial, and like realistic aspect. Yeah. So Darrell, over to you.
Yeah, for me, I will approach it with a slightly different angle. My stance is clear; it's definitely not useless. As in the form of a personal development, maybe I'll take from the angle. A lot of my most important values that I hold true to myself today came from sports itself. Understanding the importance of teamwork, back to a point on grit and determination, which is how I like set myself up for success, consistency, a lot of these things that I've built up to characterize myself as who I am today came from the very nature of sports. And I think without it, I wouldn't have the ability to develop those important learnings that shaped me to who I am today. And of course, for those of you right now that you're still maybe in school and you're very invested into the sports you're doing, but realize that, hey, maybe what is that doing is affecting academics and stuff, my advice to you is that it's definitely possible to juggle both. It's just that you have to learn to make some sacrifices, either maybe in the form of, say, lesser social time with your friends and stuff. But something interesting that I think Dixon might also agree with, some of my best friends today actually are the teammates that I played the sport with. Right. So something that still keep us in touch, that we regularly still play together, and we played together in the same club after we graduated and stuff. That was actually our form of keeping in touch and making sure that that friendship on a personal level doesn't break. And I think it's those friendships that are forged through battles and through this camaraderie that are actually the strongest. So they are some of my closest friends today that are actually the ones that played floorball. And I think till this day, for me, I genuinely think that one of my highlights in my life was actually representing the nation. So in floorball, if you're not familiar, the top countries are all the Scandinavian countries. And when the Angmo's goal is different, man, I tell you, it's different. 50-50 ball, we both go for it. He stay there, I fly. That's the extent of how physically difficult it was competing against the Caucasians, because they're just so much bigger. The Europeans are insane. But it was still a wonderful experience. We didn't come away from the tournament winning it, but of course, for me, it was just really about being there, singing the national anthem, having that national team flag on your chest and singing, representing your nation. That was just a out-of-body experience, something that I would not exchange anything for. So that is a very important core memory to me, and especially to me growing up into an adult. Most of the values that I bring into the modern world today are all shaped off sports. So if you're wondering, hey, is sports useless? Of course, if you're looking at it from a purely monetary point of view, I would say, of course, it loses out, right? To maybe say you go for a career in technology, right? In tech, the salary is a lot higher. But I think what you would want to consider is that there are so many intangible things that you can't put a price tag on, that sports bring into your life, into your character, that you will be really a very different person without sports. And of course, on a personal day-to-day basis, the exercise and that stress reliever is something that you really need. So definitely do not stop pursuing sports. If you're wondering, oh, is it useless or not? Sometimes I just find like Singaporeans, we are a bit too practical, and that like pisses me off sometimes, but that's just how we are, right? Everything needs to be about like, oh, in the future, is it practical and stuff? But, just enjoy doing the stuff you enjoy doing, I think that's the beauty in life as well. Okay, but I think with that, we kind of pretty much have a nice little wrap up to today's episode. So for the first half, I hope that you guys have a better insight on how you can manage your busy schedule. And for those athletes out there that can relate exactly to what me and Dixon are talking about, we wish you all the best. Pursue excellence in your sports. Dixon, any last shout out to maybe student athletes that are still tuning in at this point?
I would say cherish every moment you have with your teammates, because you can never recreate those moments, and those moments are very fleeting. Like once they're gone, right? They're gone. So don't just focus on the future, but maybe give some attention to what's happening right now, in the present, because those moments you can never relive it again. Yeah, you wish you were young again. Yeah, but all the best to your sporting endeavors as well as your academic journey.
Yeah, and remember to stay healthy and take care if you have any injuries. I think those are really a big pain point that could hold you back. But for all the real ones out there who are still listening to this point, thank you for tuning in. Remember to like the video and subscribe on YouTube, as well as to subscribe if you are also tuning in on Spotify. And we hope that this has been a good one for you. And with that, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It sound right, boy.